Welcome to the Practitioner's Pathway Podcast, a discussion by mental health professionals for mental health professionals. I'm your host, Claudia Dominique, a third-year graduate student in the clinical mental health counseling field. Today we're discussing working with children who've been affected by substance abuse, and here to lend her expertise to the topic today is our guest, Wendy Berkshire, prevention specialist and director of Camp Mariposa, a children's camp which helps youth build connection and resiliency after seeing a loved one who's been afflicted by substance use disorder. Thank you so much for joining me today, Wendy.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, well, let's get started. So why don't you share with me and our listeners how long you've been working as a prevention specialist and what got you into this field of work?
Well, my background is in program planning, and I have come to understand that I've been in prevention for a very long time, though it began with youth and families when I was a youth and children's ministry director. So I did that for 16 years, was ready to move on, and found the organization East End Community Services, which we had partnered with before with some work with the youth and doing mission. And so I began working there, and then after about a year of being there, they went into discussions with the Aluna Network, which is our mothership of Camp Mariposa, to begin a camp program here in Dayton. So we are one of 17 in the country. And so when they brought Camp Mariposa to Dayton 6.5, almost 7 years ago, they tagged me as the person to help lead it because of my background with youth and my background in planning outdoor experiences and building teams. I'm really passionate about building teams and using people's different skills and whatnot. We'll talk a little bit about how mentors are a part of the camp. And so then I went and got my certification in prevention specialist for the state of Ohio. And then, as we'll talk about in a little bit, I have a background with substance use disorder in my family. So it just all tied together into a perfect fit, really.
Wow, it sounds like you really found your niche in this field.
I really have. It's been so. It's really I've been really blessed to do a lot of great work over my 35+ year career. But I would say that this is most impactful that I've done. So I feel real fortunate.
Wow.
Yeah.
If there's anybody out there who's thinking about getting certified in, the same thing you're certified in, so becoming a prevention specialist, what are some skills or some assets you think that they should have in order to kind of flourish in that field?
Yeah, there's a lot of education and training. There's a whole process to become a certified prevention specialist through the state. You start out as a registered applicant. There's 6 different domains you have to be trained in, so policy and advocacy, programming, leadership, communication. I think having the skill set of working with people is really important, and the ability to connect people, and really with a collaborative effort. I think that has been one of the keys as to why Dayton has grown so much since we started, because we're not a silo. And I think prevention 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, was very much a silo kind of setting. And we do a lot of great things at camp, but there's a lot of other prevention specialists in the community. They're doing really amazing work. And so let's collaborate and team build with them and bring them in as experts in the different areas of prevention. And so when you have a child who has experienced a substance use disorder, in their family system, they have a 45% higher risk of becoming an addict themselves. And so prevention is really important to help stop that generational addiction, which is really what we're focused on. And we'll talk about all the tools and everything that we give them to help build their resiliency.
Yeah, but it really sounds like prevention specialty is kind of focused on, having that proactive care.
Yes.
For individuals.
Yes.
Helping get ahead of it.
Exactly. What can we do to help prevent before we have to do an intervention or, of course, once there's somebody who needs to get into recovery, then that's on the whole other spectrum. And so there's a spectrum, and so prevention's over in this part of the spectrum, and let's give the education and the knowledge and the skills and the tools to help prevent. It's really interesting because we had a teen camper who said during our one of our closing circles, he said, Miss Wendy, he said, everybody could benefit from camp. And he's absolutely right because of the life skills that are taught. It's just that we are working with that selective group. But it really is about building life skills that they will carry with them, hopefully. We're seed planters. I always consider we're farmers. And we're farmers planting seeds of knowledge and experience and connection and community with kids and teens so that they will carry that with them as they go on.
What a unique opportunity to have such a positive, long-lasting impact on these children and their lives.
Yeah. Again, I feel incredibly fortunate.
Yeah, beautiful.
We all do who work with them.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we jump right into our topic of conversation today? We've touched on it a little bit already, but I thought it would be helpful to first define the problem for our listeners who maybe don't know a lot about working with youth who've been affected by a loved one's use of substance abuse. So, Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about how having a loved one who struggles with substance use can affect use both mentally, physically, and socially?
Yeah, so when children grow up with, and oftentimes it's a parent, but it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be a grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, sibling. But when you grow up in that family system, you learn three things, unfortunately. You learn not to talk, you learn not to trust others, and you learn not to feel. So there's a lot of secrecy that's involved with addiction, and the opposite of addiction is connection. And so kids come into camp really with that kind of those myths of misunderstanding. And they also believe that they're the only ones who are struggling or whose family is struggling in that way because they're not talking about it at school. They're not talking about it with their friends. They're not mentioning that, my mom's an addict or my grandpa's in prison or, whatever the situation is. Because, again, it goes back to the don't talk, don't trust others, don't show your feelings. And so camp really is an opportunity for us to help break down those myths that they automatically believe. And the other really hard thing is that they also just naturally believe that there's something that they did to cause it, that they have caused their family member to choose, in their eyes, choose the drugs or the alcohol over them. And so that leaves a real painful, traumatic loss in the child's life. And so they're constantly looking how to fill that, and that they focus on what could they be doing differently? How could they have changed the situation, or how can they control their family's choices? And I can relate to that because I talked about what my background is with my in my professional life, but in my personal life, I grew up with parents who both struggled with alcohol. And so I know what it's like to struggle to be seen. And how many things could I do and do really, really well or perfectly so that, my parents would choose me over the alcohol. And of course, I didn't have the understanding or the knowledge growing up as a kid. I also didn't talk about it, which is, I can see how all of that gets built into their lives, unfortunately. Even kids who maybe were taken away from a family member at a very, very young age, their body still stores that trauma, and they still understand or believe that there was something that they did to cause me not to live with mom and dad, or being raised, by grandparents, or being raised by aunt and uncles. So a lot of that is unfortunately naturally built in. So the 7 C's, which I know we're going to talk about, the first three parts of it is how that is related. I didn't cause it. I can't control it. And the third one is I can't cure it. And so the it is the addiction in their lives. But kids naturally, unfortunately, believe that somehow they caused it, somehow they can control it. I mean, like hiding parents' alcohol, parents' drugs, grandparents, alcohol, whatever it is that they can somehow, or if we act out, then it's going to draw more attention to me instead of what the substance use is. So
it sounds like struggling with, having someone you love who is also struggling with alcohol abuse or use really creates this negative way of being and believing about yourself that can really affect the way that you relate with others and the way you relate with yourself. I wonder, what are some of the repercussions for children or youth who are experiencing that, who maybe don't unlearn that way of being and enter life?
Yeah, so that's where the generational addiction can come into play. It's the only thing that they've seen. It's the only thing that they know. The chaos that often kids live in is they just learn to live at a level of chaos. And they think that that's natural and normal, or being responsible for themselves. A lot of kids are not only responsible for themselves, but they're responsible for their siblings. So they have to take on a role in their family that is not a child's role, but more of a parental role or a responsible role. There's lots of different roles that we all play in our family systems, right? We could be the scapegoat, we could be the clown, we could be the adult. I was that, and I wasn't the firstborn. A lot of times it's a firstborn. But my brother didn't take on that role, so I did because I figured somebody had to. And so we see that a lot amongst the kids. But we also see the opposite. So I think that's one of the myths that a lot of people have, is that kids who grow up with substance use in their lives automatically are just doomed. And that absolutely is not true. What we really focus on oftentimes at camp is helping them see that this is part of your story, but it doesn't define the rest of your life. And we have all kinds of mentors at camp who are examples of that. And we don't use us as examples, or, old prevention was scare tactics. You remember the whole, well, no, you don't remember. You're too young. Sorry. The whole, this is a fried egg. This is your brain on drugs. The whole scare tactic is not effective prevention. Education, connection, community is prevention education. So I'm sorry, I got off topic a little bit there.
You're okay. Yeah, like you were talking about earlier, connection is, the opposite of addiction. So focusing on those interpersonal connections and building those relationships is really where we're going to see the biggest impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we have such a great, we retain our retention rate for our campers is one of the top in the country, which is remarkable because, kids' lives are busy, kids' lives are chaotic, but they come, it's the common thread of why they come to camp is the loved one's substance use disorder. But what keeps them coming back to camp is the community that's built. And once they become a part of the community, because everybody seeks connection. Everybody is wired for connection. And so that connection and the community that we see built at camp is what keeps them returning. They build relationships. They build relationships with their peers. They build relationships with the mentors. They, can grow and get leadership opportunities when we have junior counselors, which that part of the program is really growing, which is really great. And so that's what keeps them coming back. I took a teen boy to get some ice cream last Friday because I know he'd been struggling and kind of heard through the grapevine. He wasn't sure about teen camp. And so he agreed to go get ice cream with me. And he said, I said, so what's the scoop about not wanting to come to teen camp? Because a lot of times they don't want to move from youth camp to teen camp because that's what they know and that's their community and they are comfortable with that. And he said, well, I think that I've dealt with all my feelings about what happened with my mom. And I said, well, it's obvious you've done amazing work, but it's not a end all be all. We don't come to a point where we're done working at it. But what I said to him was, but you've grown in your insight and in your leadership. And he's just a real quiet leader and is a really fun-hearted boy, young man, I should say. And I said, other kids need to see that and need to experience that from you. So I just want to give you a little something to think about, that if you obviously have made a lot of strides in your journey, and now is your amazing opportunity to continue that in supporting your peers. So he's like, okay, I'll think about it.
And that's all we're asking, right? Just thinking
exactly,
about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I can't control it. The whole 7 C's of I didn't cause it and I can't control it and I can't cure it. That curing is that fixing. And I'll be honest with you, the it is addiction. But those 3 things, those 7 C's, can be applied to any part of our life. And I will tell you that the 7 C's has been incredibly impactful to me. Like if you think about anything that you're struggling with, you're struggling with, friendships, or you're struggling with family members, even if there's not addiction. I was struggling with a situation last week at work, and I honestly was like, can't control it. And I didn't cause the person to behave this way. I have to be careful that I'm like a recovering fixer, is what I've always said through a lot of counseling. But I'm a recovering fixer, which is what curing is, right? It's like I don't have that ability to fix other people's lives. I can pour into them, like you're talking about the teen. I can remind him of his leadership skills. I can encourage him. I can support him, all those things. But when it comes down to it, I can't make those decisions for him or anybody else. So the 7 C's have been really impactful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just highlights how important it is for us to not only share the education that we know, but also practice it ourselves and mirror it and live it.
Yes, especially when it comes to our mindfulness and meditation and our brain work that we do at camp, which I know we're going to get into. But when I went through, I'm trained in social resiliency model, and so I do a lot of trainings in the community for adults and youth. We've trained about close to 700 youth and adults in this last 2 years. And I'm speaking to practitioners, most of them. I mean, we're community members too, and youth. But I'm speaking to practitioners, and they all teach it. But then for us to be able to practice it ourselves is often the challenge. So it's always an encouragement that I do too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, kind of putting us a little back on track. You're so easy to talk to. I feel like I could just talk to you about this forever. But kind of jumping into talking about working with this population, for some of our listeners who are maybe just starting to work with this population or wanting to embolden their skills, what are some things that you wish people knew about children who've been affected by substance use, and what are some really common misconceptions that you see?
Yeah, and I think we kind of referred to that a little bit earlier. The one I always think of is when I have new mentors coming in. And one of the things that they're always surprised at after their first weekend or after their first time they volunteer and really kind of see what camp is all about is they expected there to be a lot of behavioral issues. So, I think that that's a myth. I think people think that because kids are struggling, therefore they're going to misbehave. Now, let's remember that children's behaviors is the way that they communicate. And so we have to always, keep that knowledge and that lens. We also have to be careful that we're looking at things. Well, we're always going to look at things through our own personal lens and our own personal experiences. But I think we have to kind of always keep that at the forefront of knowing, is this my lens? Because like parents not responding to me. Well, I was always super responsible as a mom and a parent, blah, blah, blah. But as best as I could. I'd make it sound like I did great. I made lots of mistakes. But I always have to be careful that I'm not looking at situations through my lens as a mom, when I was raising my children. I think that people think that working with kids who have been impacted by substance use disorder don't know how to have fun, and that they really are struggling. And they do struggle, but they also really embrace opportunities for challenges. Challenges at camp that we see. We call it challenge by choice. We see them just really embracing things that they would never think to do before, and people think that that's not going to be the case. And I just think people miss the truth. Sorry.
You're okay.
They miss the truth that they're just looking for connection, and that's what they really need in their lives. They need those healthy adults that they know truly care about them to make a difference. And that can happen anywhere. That happens in schools, that happens with teachers, that happens with, social workers, with working with youth. It happens with counselors. You have lots of different stories, of course, of making that connection with kids. And kids are really looking for that. So I think kind of breaking down those barriers and those myths, and that they're just going to turn up like their family member. Mm-hmm. I think that's the other thing that people they kind of write them off. Like, yeah, but look at the situation they're coming from. Look at their family system. That, as I said earlier, this is a part of their journey, but that doesn't define them. And it's not going to just automatically think that they're going to choose a negative path in their life. It's not true. There's a lot of protective factors that go into place for that not to happen, even beyond camp and outside of camp.
Yeah. And what a powerful message that you're sharing with them, that their story is so much more than this part of them. It's a part, but there's so much more to them. And it sounds like when thinking about working with this population, it's important to remember to meet these kids where they are and with who they are.
That is mentoring 101.
Yeah.
And that is trauma-informed practice 101. Is we don't ask what's happened to them. We're what's wrong with them, I should say. We ask, well, what's happened to them, and where can we fit in to help? That's the response. And so that's how we train our mentors with trauma-informed practice. And we don't, I forget what you said. You said something that
I said meet them where they are.
And meet them where they're at. And
yeah.
so that's mentoring 101 too,
yeah.
is meeting them where they're at, not where we want them to be. Because again, if we're meeting them where we want to be, then we're playing some sort of control in the situation. And we don't have that kind of control. And that's why we're very particular about the type of mentors that we bring in and train. There's a lot of people that want to help kids and want to help people. But there's also that savior complex with people who think that, that they're going to go out and save the world. And we all have best intentions, right? And we all want to help others. But we have to remember what's in our control and what's not. And we have to keep really clear boundaries, especially working with children. You have to keep really clear boundaries to really be effective and help them.
Yeah, and making sure that what we want for them isn't getting in the way of what that kid needs from us. And making sure that takes the priority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing all of that. So we kind of already talked a little bit about Camp Mariposa and the work that you all do, but I just wanted to give us a chance to highlight what are some of the modalities or interventions that you all use to positively impact the lives of your campers and sort of like the day-to-day functions of the camp.
Yeah, and if I could just give a little brief overview of camp.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people, when they think of camp, they think of summer camp, but we are a year-round prevention camp. So we have two cohorts. We have a youth camp and we have a teen camp. And each of those cohorts goes for a full weekend 6 times a year. So Friday to Sunday, and teens go till Saturday night because they get busy and they are in jobs and whatnot. But there's absolutely no cost involved. We transport them. We provide the linens for them. We go to 2 different camp locations nearby, which we don't talk about where we are until a child is involved and enrolled into the camp because of some, non-custodial concerns. And so we're real protective in that regard. But obviously, once the camper is in, then they know where we are. And so we have 6 camp weekends a year. And one of the, so camp really addresses trauma in lots of different ways. And one of the ways is safety and also understanding the expectations of what's happening and what's going to happen next. So schedule. And so it always looks a little different, but they know we do this at this time. They know we have a Friday night connection circle. They know we're going to write a letter to addiction on Saturday night. They know we're going to get to Saturday morning is our grow time. And I love that because it's a camper that's going into the teen camp that coined it that. And so it's our education time. And we use different evidence-based curriculums at camp. We use probably 8 different ones. Too Good for Drugs, Too Good for Violence. We do signs of suicide. We do vaping education for the teens, a lot of different education. And so that Saturday morning, they know we always do morning meditation because mindfulness and our brain work is a really important part of camp. They need to understand how the body and the brain are connected in terms of stress, and then how we manage the stress and how we manage our emotions. So like when we did managing emotions, we built rockets. Of course, there's a lot of teaching involved in the rockets, but then because we talked about like if we don't manage our emotions and manage our feelings, we're going to blow. Mm-hmm. Dan Siegel and the whole hand, if you're gonna blow your top if you don't stay in our upstairs brain. We call it our upstairs brain and our downstairs brain at camp. But it's just a really great way for them to understand, we're not going to make our best choices and we're not going to have reasoning skills if we're in our downstairs brain. So anyways, we do a lot of creative things in the grow time. So anyways, back to the boy who coined it that. He said, well, it's an opportunity for us to grow into being our best selves.
Oh.
I love that. Yes, it is, sir.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So I have other camp directors who say, how do you get them? They feel like it's school. And I said, it's all how you present it. It's all how you frame it out. And people will rise to the expectation you set for them, including children. And people don't believe children will, back to your other question. So anyways, we have grow time, and then we always have themes built into the camp. So and then we do a lot of fun camp activities. So anyways, back to the emotional management, for instance. So we did the rocket building, which was very impactful. And they did it in teams. It wasn't individualized. We made sensory bottles. We give them tools for their toolbox. That's what we call it, so that they can take them home. Like, you do this and learn at camp, it's great. But if we're not taking those tools and using them in the rest of our life, in our daily lives, then it was just camp, and we want it to go beyond camp. And so we will teach them different skills and give them different tools that they then can take home and do. And then there's just a lot of fun. So we do a lot of camp activities. We do, nature hikes. We do nighttime hikes. We do swimming. We do zip lining. We do horseback riding, giant swing. Oh. Yeah. Gaga. They're obsessed with Gaga. They love Gaga. And I usually play with them unless, I end up having to go to chiropractor once because of Gaga. I'm like, okay.
They were taking it too serious.
I got to bring it down. Well, but that's the thing is that a lot of them will say, well, we don't get to play Gaga at school because everybody gets so upset. It's like, well, not here, because if we start to find ourselves getting upset, we take a break.
And we have our tools.
And we have our tools, and we use those tools. And the other thing, too, I was thinking about this before. One of the things that I think has surprised me with working with the kids that has been an underlying life skill that we've addressed is conflict resolution. They do not know how to do conflict resolution. And so we teach those tools to them. And I'll never forget, there's 2 sisters that come to camp, and the one put her hands on the other one in a way that was not safe. And I would happen to be right there. And I'm like, oh, no. And then we paused and we talked about it. We talked about why that wasn't safe and what are we going to do moving forward. And they did the apology and the acceptance of the apology and moved on. So then Saturday night during the connection circle, when we give snaps of encouragement to each other, that's one of the things that's one of our traditions at camp. She gave me a snap for helping her solve a problem without being yelled at, and I just think, and that's no judgment on the family system, but if you don't learn those things growing up yourself or they're modeled in a different way, then you don't know how to practice those. So there's so much conflict resolution that happens at camp too, and we're just really proud of the kids with that.
Yeah, and that I think in itself is so powerful because I think it shows how at their core, kids want to be understood.
Right.
And they want to be able to choose actions that are in alignment with their values.
Yeah.
But they don't always have the tools or the education needed to make those decisions.
Yeah, and everybody has a need to be seen, heard, known, supported, and loved. And I think that's what makes camp one of the things that makes camp so remarkable is they're really seen for who they are, not who we want them to be or where we want them to be, and supported in a way that they need. So,
without judgment.
Without judgment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Truly
that's not our place.
Yeah, a beautiful and unique, transformative place.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of spaces that kids get to exist where that's the case.
Yeah. We're very proud of that. And even the education that we do that really builds into the protective factors for them on Saturday morning, the curriculum that we use, I really like it because it's the foundational is how to set goals. And we have to learn how to set goals. I mean, we have to learn how to communicate with others in an informative and impactful way. We have to know how to manage our emotions, which we've talked about. We give them peer refusal skills because as they grow, they're going to need those even more.
Absolutely.
Because of their, all the peers and what's happening around them. But we go through so many layers before we even get to talking about tobacco and talking about vaping and talking about drugs and alcohol. But by the time we get there, they've already had a lot of brain knowledge because of what we've taught. And so they can understand, well, this is what interrupts your brain. This is what interrupts the growth of your brain. And that's, what we don't want. And so this is how we prevent that. So back to prevention.
Absolutely. You're arming them with the tools they need so that when they get presented with that information, they already know how to make a decision that's going to, positively impact their lives without you even having to tell them the right or wrong answer.
Yeah, we can hope so.
Right.
And then we make, exactly. And then we make mistakes and we have do-overs and we learn how to have a do-over.
Yeah.
Which isn't always something that kids learn. And that there's always going to be consequences to our choices. Sometimes they're positive consequences and sometimes they're not positive. But have we learned from them? And what kind of choices are we going to make moving forward?
And where do we go from here?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about it a little bit, quite a bit throughout this, podcast already. But I think that just speaks to how impactful these are. But I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the 7 C's of addiction, kind of what they are for our listeners who maybe don't know, and then kind of how you all use the 7 C's of addiction to help children cope with substance use.
Yeah. So the first 3, which I've referred to already, is I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it. Those are the 3 impacts of the addiction themselves. So we help break down those myths. And then there's the but. And the next 4 are the things that we focus on at camp. So I can take care of myself by communicating my feelings, making good choices, and celebrating myself. So when you look at I can take care of myself, learning how to set boundaries for yourself. And we teach them that. Learning how to physically take care of themselves. And this is why we do this at night. And this is why we do this in the morning. And this is why we take care of our bedding and our clothing and all of that at camp. When you are doing something that you're not comfortable with, being able to communicate that. So communicating my feelings. Remember at the beginning I said kids will come in believing that we're not supposed to talk about our feelings. We don't talk. And so when I interview a camper, because every camper and family gets interviewed before they come in, I acknowledge that that's the truth of what they've grown up with thus far. But I help them see that we're not afraid of our feelings. We're not afraid to talk about our feelings. As you can tell already in this podcast once, I cried. I am a crier. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm happy. I cry a lot when I'm really proud of something or something a child has done. And they know it. But I grew up being made fun of about that. And so nobody ever gets made fun of. Everybody is included 100% no matter where they come from at camp. It's okay if you don't want to talk about your feelings, but you got to be sure you're managing them somehow. So we do a lot of different ways of that. So we communicate our feelings through writing, through art. We do so much art at camp, through music. They created a song. We have a couple mentors who are musicians, and he helped our great mentor, Nick. He helped the kids, all the different kids, create a song on the 7 C's. And then he has a friend who does music videos, and he put it in a music video.
Oh, how fun.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my gosh.
The kids absolutely loved it. Yeah, it's just, that went to the national camps.
Oh,
but so there's a lot of different ways they communicate their feelings. They don't have to just talk about it because some people, it's not just kids, that's not what they're comfortable with. But just because I am doesn't mean that everybody else is. And so we communicate our feelings on lots of different ways, and even through nature. Nature is a really important part at camp, and learning how nature impacts our stress. It can impact our stress in a positive way. And then making good choices. It's all about that upstairs brain versus downstairs brain. Noticing when kids make really positive, healthy choices at camp and with one another, or with a mentor, or sometimes when things don't go so well. You know, we don't pretend like it doesn't exist, but there's no punitive, involvement whatsoever. It's a learning experience. And then celebrating myself, which we do. We have camp this coming weekend, and it's our all camper weekend. And so we always take the last camp of the year. We're all together, 50 plus campers and 27 mentors. It's a big old weekend. We have a blast. But what we're doing is we're really celebrating our year together. What did we learn about ourselves? What did we learn about each other? What did we learn from each other? And then we celebrate the campers that are graduating into the teen camp. And so we find different ways even throughout the year to celebrate. Like we spend our Friday night circle saying who has something that they want to share from the last 2 months that they can celebrate about themselves. Like, I'm getting a better grade in this. I turned this one friend away who wasn't making good choices. I got a new puppy. Whatever the celebration is, we celebrate it as a group. So that's really how the 7 C's are really the foundational work of what's happening at camp.
Yeah, it sounds like that first piece is really focused on having them understand how addiction exists in their life and how it has nothing to do with them, and there's nothing they can do to change it in that moment.
Exactly.
And then the rest of it is how to move forward and how to deal with it and build connection. Yeah.
All the things that we can control and that are within our wheelhouse, our powerhouse, are those last 4. Those healthy choices, is communicating our feelings, all of that. The first 3, unfortunately, are the impact that each child has, but that's not where we have to live. We have to acknowledge it. We have to understand it so that we can move into the other 4.
Absolutely. And I think even that commitment to acknowledging it and allowing them to understand it is unique in itself. I think, just to my own opinion, I think there's this misconception that kids can't understand the why. And so we don't tell them because they won't understand it, they won't get what's going on. Yeah. But I think kids understand more than we think that they do, and they're capable and they're resilient if we give them a chance.
And even if we don't have the answer, if as adults, if we say that is a really good question, that is a really hard situation, I wish I could tell you the answer to that. I can't, but what I can tell you is that we will walk alongside you while you learn and you process that.
You won't be alone.
Yeah.
And that probably feels so validating and secure to someone who maybe hasn't felt validated and secure in a while.
Yeah. I think, again, that's helps what builds the community of camp and what helps the kids to keep coming back. And the families, we're very involved in the families' lives too. We do parenting classes. We do additional activities outside of camp for the families so that they can have opportunities to go out and enjoy each other. Like we'll go to a Dragons game. We'll go bowling. We went to Young's Dairy Farm and all free of charge for the families. Our funding pays for that. Our national funding does. And so it gives families an opportunity to go have fun. Like when that one boy who did the grow time, his whole family came last year to Young's Dairy, and the adults in that family had never putt-putted. I know. See, our lens is like, oh, I took my kids putt-putting all the time. They'd never been putt. They were having as much fun as the kids were.
Oh.
It was very joyful. And then we have relationships with like K-12 Gallery and the Dragons and the Mosaic Institute. Oh my gosh, the Mosaic Institute came and did an amazing art piece with us for the teen campers. But we have collaborative relationships with organizations in the community that gives us the opportunity to bring our families. So we're incredibly grateful for that. Again, remember, we're not a silo. We have to be connected, and we're very connected within the community.
Absolutely. And finding those places of connection and also bringing the family into the work that you're doing. As we know, when you're working with kids, you're not just working with the kid, you're working with the whole family.
Exactly. Yeah, we can teach all these skills at camp, and then they go back and they're struggling. But then when they get to the teen, like this teen girl had the vaping education we do, and she, took it upon herself to try and talk to her mom about the vaping that was going on with the adults. And it didn't go well because, the family members weren't ready to hear it. But she shared that with me, and I said, I'm just proud of you for, that took a lot of courage for you to speak some knowledge, and that's what you did. And then you have to just lay it there for them to be ready. When they're ready to pick it up, they'll pick it up.
Absolutely.
But you can't control that, right? Back to the 7 C's. Can't control that. But I'm so proud of you that you, and this is a very reserved, shy person. So that was a huge step for her.
Took a lot of courage.
A lot of
for her to
courage.
do that.
Yeah.
And making sure to affirm that choice that she made and make her feel empowered.
Yeah, we do a class on Tuesdays called we call it Together Tuesday because that's just how the families. So even during COVID, we were doing it online because the family members, the parents and the grandparents, were starving for connection also. And so we use a curriculum called Strengthening Families, and so it parallels the adults are learning the same knowledge as the youth with us teaching and somebody else is teaching the adults. And so at their level, obviously, and then, we're talking about how to set goals in a family, how to communicate more effectively, how to set your expectations, and what are your values that you're teaching your kids, and how to communicate those values. And then they have homework. They have homework each week, and they just love the class. So we're about to start that back up at the first of the year.
Awesome. So we kind of already talked a little bit about some of the things that these kids take away from this camp, some of the skills that they build, the things that they learn. But I was just wondering, from your perspective, or maybe things that you've heard from your past campers or current campers, what are some of the biggest things that they take away from this camp?
I think knowing that they belong. I think belonging is a real key to somebody's health and wellness, is a sense of belonging. When somebody feels separated or alone, that's going to impact their mental health. So I think a sense of belonging, that they know even when they graduate from camp or they, are getting busy working, and so they can no longer come to camp. They still will come to events, and they are always welcome back in. And so I think that sense of belonging is really important. I think the sense of empowerment. I think that the families especially feel empowered, that they aren't alone also, and that they have are given the skills and the knowledge that they need to be the best version of themselves. I think that that's what I had one of the campers write me a note once about all the things that she loved about camp. And what I loved about it, I mean, it was very sweet, obviously, but what I loved about it is seeing her write in this letter to me all the things that we always say at camp. Like, you just want us to be our best, grow up to be our best selves. Because that's a phrase that we use at camp a lot. We want to give you the tools and the skills that you need to grow up to be your best self. Whatever that is. We don't know what that is. But so I think that they're taking on and incorporating those things into their daily life. And we see that through notes. We see that through our classes that we lead. We'll see that with campers that come back who graduated and the things that they say. I have a grandparent who recently did an evaluation on camp, and what she stated in there was of how impactful the camp is on their whole family was really powerful.
So not just with the kids themselves, but the whole family dynamic.
Exactly.
And the way they moved forward from that camp was shifted in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
How beautiful to know that the efforts that you're putting in can have such a transformative.
Yeah, it goes back to that. Yeah. And that's why Camp Mariposa means butterfly in Spanish, because we believed it to be a transformative experience, and it really is. You know, we'd like to have all the kids come and all the kids stay, and that's just not the nature of the program. And so the ones that do come for whatever length of time they can, because they can come year after year. They don't. It's not a 1 year and done. But there's always a rolling new group of kids coming in. So we're always looking to bring in referrals for campers and that 9 to 12-year-old, the youth camp, because the teen camp is full all the time because of the youth who graduate into the teen camp. So
move up.
Yes.
Stay with the community.
Yes.
I know that you had shared that you had received a testimonial from a family that you were wanting to share. Was that something you were still wanting to share with us now?
Well, I would love to, because I think it really speaks to the whole family, and also it's like the domino effect, right? We start with a camper, and then it goes to their family, and then it goes. And so I think this is really powerful. This is a grandparents who are raising their grandchildren because of the substance use disorder in their parents' lives. She said, thanks to the coping skills that have been taught so intentionally, my granddaughter and I have had very honest and sometimes raw conversations, and we both have felt free to share our sadness as well as joy. As a veteran teacher, I feel that Camp Mariposa is a far more powerful tool than the programs regarding drug abuse that are promoted in the public schools. Camp Mariposa is a more meaningful experience for kids who are high risk. Camp Mariposa helps kids make lasting relationships and builds a community in which high-risk kids feel valued and celebrated.
Wow.
I know. And she just wrote that like last week. Yeah. And she has the ability to eloquently speak that, so that's a gift that she has. And she is a veteran teacher in a local school district. Not everybody has that ability, but I know the sentiment of what we do is felt by the family members. And also because a lot of the families are the ones who refer other campers to us. Yeah. So they're talking to their friends who they know have struggled with somebody in their lives with substance use. And so they're promoting camp. Like, we have a couple kids who come from Lima in Sydney. And we have 5 campers from Cincinnati. And the rest of them are, all local. So the majority of them are local schools, the Montgomery County. But we have kids who are traveling over an hour and a half to come to camp.
Wow.
I know.
You said domino effect earlier, and I just, in my brain, couldn't stop thinking of the butterfly effect. The idea where a butterfly's wing can create a wind, that'll create a current, that'll create something else. And that's what I was thinking about when you were telling me about how these kids tell their friends, and it just gets to Lima, Ohio, you know?
Claudia, how have I been doing this so long and I never thought of that?
Well, this is why we do podcasts, so we can, collaborate.
I love that. I love the butterfly. I read to the kids sometimes the cocoon effect. So there's this, story about a man who didn't want the caterpillar to struggle inside the cocoon. And so he thought he'd help it out by, cutting it open to kind of help it get released earlier. He didn't want him to go through all the struggle. And so what they learned in that was that's the struggle and the pushing out of the cocoon with the butterfly is what pushes all the color into the wings.
Oh my gosh.
And so he took that away. And so we talk about that at camps, like these are hard struggles, but these struggles are really going to help you grow and to be the beautiful butterfly that you're intended to be. So
absolutely.
And then the butterfly effect. Thank you for that.
So many good butterfly metaphors.
So many butterfly metaphors.
But that kind of circles back to what you were saying earlier about how we can't make a kid go to the finish line. We can't just put them there. They have to choose their own path and get there on their own time.
Right.
And I think that story is really indicative of that sentiment too.
Absolutely. And I think that's where boundaries really come into, back to the question about, practitioners and anybody who's in the helping field and working with kids. People all the time say, how do you do this work? And I'm like, what do you mean? How do I do this work? It's
how
great.
Do you not?
It's great work. And I think that they, are thinking about the pain and the suffering. And there is pain and suffering. There's pain and suffering everywhere, unfortunately. I'm very clear about where my role is and where my role isn't. And I think that, anybody going into this field or any other helping field, I think having really good I almost said self-care because that's another big thing. I'm the co-chair of the Montgomery County Prevention Coalition Self-Care Committee. So self-care and teaching self-care with kids and self-care for ourselves, having boundaries is a really important part of self-care. So,
absolutely. So ensuring that we're doing that part too.
Yeah.
To keep, the kids on track to their goals and us, emotionally separated from overstepping.
Yeah, remember what you can't control.
Yeah.
Remember what you can't fix.
Again.
There it is.
So it's clear that Camp Mariposa is an excellent resource for youth who have experienced a loved one who has struggled with substance use. If we have any listeners who are interested in referring clients to Camp Mariposa, how would practitioners go about getting them involved, and what kind of children would be a good fit for this camp?
Yeah, so if you can't remember my name and you can't remember East End Community Services, but you remember Camp Mariposa, just Google that, and the information will go to our mothership, which is Aluna Network out of Philadelphia, and then they forward all the information to me. So if you just Google Camp Mariposa or Camp Mariposa Dayton, you'll find us. Any child who has a substance use disorder anywhere in their lives, it doesn't matter who it is. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. So what makes a successful connection is that they are able to commit to the 6 camps of the year, that they are communicating. They communicate well with me. I always tell family members, your 2 quickest ways out of camp is that you don't respond to me or that you just are a no-show, because then that's keeping somebody else from the program. So they just reach out. We do a quick little brief discussion on the phone. I send out the registration information, and then we set up an interview. And the interview is just an opportunity for me to get to know them, for them to get to know me, to understand what camp is, what camp isn't, and again, setting those expectations up front so that people will rise to the expectations you set for them. And I think that's just been the key, one of the keys of successfully bringing kids in. Kids need to be able to work in a group setting. It is not individualized. It is not therapy. I'm very clear with especially practitioners who bring campers to us. They have to be able to understand that it's prevention and not therapy, though we do therapeutic experiences, and also that they can participate successfully in group settings. That's probably the only other situation we've had where it took too much one-on-one for them to be able to be successful. And we're a group mentoring based model, and everything is done in groups. So usually those are the real keys. And we do have openings for the 9 to 12-year-olds because we have kids who are graduating this weekend into teen camp. So yeah.
Wonderful.
So I love new campers.
So if anyone is interested, they can either reach out to you or visit the website and contact
and they'll
you that
get
way.
to me. Yes.
Perfect.
That'd be
All
great.
right. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of our time together, unfortunately. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we close ourselves out?
I don't think so. I really appreciate giving the opportunity to elevate the program. Dayton does have a great program, but what we really care about is elevating the need for children who often are the silent sufferers in the situation. And the people who are working with kids in schools and in community-based settings, they know the families that you're aware of the struggles often that are going on, and that you would be a great referral opportunity for kids to be involved in the camp. So that's why I love doing this and speaking about the program, and it's just a really amazing program. And I also get people who want to come and volunteer. So we have sometimes we have volunteers that'll come on a Saturday just to give, especially people who are in school still. We had a student from UD who found us, and she started volunteering, and then she became a mentor. And then she's at Boonshoff School of Medicine. So now she's in med school, second year med school, still a mentor, and has brought 3 more mentors from Boonshoff School of Medicine. It's just, it's the same thing. It's like the best of the best people know what it takes, and we'll find, that's how I've gotten my best of the best mentors. So referrals for campers and referrals for mentors also are really the best of the best.
Absolutely. And it sounds like maybe anybody who's listening right now who's really resonated with some of the things we're talking about or the mission of Camp Mariposa, volunteering might be a great way for them to get involved. And
yeah, and a lot of times it's their first experience in prevention.
Yeah.
And so I think the more prevention's an unknown science in a lot of ways. And so the more that people can understand prevention, even if that's not their main responsibility or their main career, I think it can be really positive.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Wendy, for being our guest today. We've learned so much about providing informed care for children who have been affected by substance abuse. We also gained a deeper understanding about the initiatives of Camp Mariposa and how it aims to be a positive impact for this population. If you want to know more about working with children who've been impacted by loved ones' use of substances or about Camp Mariposa, please contact our podcast team or our guest. We will have our link tree with resources and our email available for those with questions or who are seeking more education. We encourage you to keep joining our conversations and to start your own so we can all help pave the pathway to a better future for mental health. Thank you.